I'm going to look at what I was going to tell you just in case I missed something, okay? You braved the onset of Minnesota winter. Nobody thought it was going to be that day, but it happened. So I truly appreciate your presence, and I already have invited you to, okay, better? It is better, okay. I've already invited you to have some wine or something to drink. Please do, okay? I'm more accustomed to appearing before you with poems. And so, the way she wants to get there, telling on myself, puts me in new territory tonight, with prose, narrative, and blackness as my means and guides. I'm happy to have the companionship of Carolyn Holbrook in these modes. Once, a while ago, we planned to tour together when our books came out, the Black Woman Tour of the wilds of Minnesota. But our publishing fates were not in sync. Her extensive list of accomplishments tells you what she was doing while I was waiting for the offer of Norton Stillman of Noden Press, thank you, Norton, to bring out my book to the public. Carolyn has been a source of comfort and advice through the very personal issues that arise in getting to tonight. So, when Matthew said a surprise reader, I thought, am I going to be surprised? or is that person going to, I hope that person is going to be Carolyn Holbrook, all right? And I'm going to introduce her to you through an extensive bio. Carolyn Holbrook is a writer, educator, and an advocate for the healing power of the arts. Amen. Okay. Her memoir and essays, Tell Me Your Names and I Will Testify, won the 2021 Minnesota Book Award for Memoir and Creative Nonfiction. Now, I want to skip and say that that is not her first Minnesota Book Award. She also, in 2010, won the Kay Sexton Award from the Minnesota Book Award Committee. And more recently, she is the founder and director of the Twin Cities-based BIPOC Conversation series, More Than a Single Story. Co-editor with David Mura of the anthology We Are Meant to Rise, Voices for Justice from Minneapolis to the World. Co-author with Arleta Little of Minnesota's civil rights icon, Dr. Josie P. Johnson's memoir, Hope in the Struggle. Her essays have appeared in numerous anthologies. Now, I'm going to skip some of this because she has been very busy. And I will have this available for people. Well, you can find it on the internet also. I want to end her introduction with, she is the mother of 5, grandmother of 8, and the great-grandmother of 2. Okay. As I said, she's been busy. Welcome to the mic, Carolyn Holbrook.
Well, I guess I'm the surprise, right? Okay, surprise, surprise. Mary, thank you so much for inviting me to read with you tonight. It was such an honor. I'm very surprised by the way that you know, and wow. So Mary invited me to read a little bit, and then I'm going to reintroduce her, and then we'll get on with the evening. So Mary mentioned my memoir, Tell Me Your Names and I Will Testify. And Jean Ann just told me to speak into the mic, which I will do. Thank you. All right. All right, so I'm just going to read the first chapter titled My Roots, because, you know, so much of Mary's book is about her roots and where she comes from and where she went and where she's still flying on. And I thought, well, you know, this is a very short chapter, and so I think I'll read it, although our roots are quite different. I start every chapter in this book with a quote from someone I admire. And this one is from Dr. Josie R. Johnson, which is something she said on the evening of the launch of her memoir. She said, "Let's leave tonight promising to tell our stories because we were not intended to survive." I was a small child when my parents divorced. My mother moved my 3 siblings and me from our home in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to make a new life in Minneapolis, and Dad moved his new family to Springfield, Massachusetts. Life is never easy for a single parent, and Mama was no exception. I always bristle when I hear white feminists talk about work as a privilege. Black women have always had to work, often cleaning the houses of wealthy white women who were privileged to work outside their homes. In addition to cleaning houses, Mama also did piecework in a factory where she was paid according to the amount of work she produced. But even with 2 jobs, she had to resort to commodities such as government cheese and this spam-like meat substance in order to keep food on the table. Even so, she kept our home spotless, made our clothes, kept us clean, and nursed us through our childhood illnesses. She found creative ways to stretch that tasteless government food, often inventing dishes she hoped we would enjoy, being sure to include healthy servings of fruit and the fresh vegetables she grew in the garden she kept on the side of our house. And she spent a lot of time in the hot summers canning so the produce from her garden would last through the cold Minnesota winter months. Like her mother before her, my mother wanted to be a hairstylist. Over time, she accomplished her dream in a much larger way than she envisioned when she was a young mother struggling to keep food on the table. She worked her way through beauty school and then went to work at Bee's Beauty Shop in South Minneapolis. Her struggle continued for a while, but things got easier after she met Barney. I was about 12 years old when Mama and Barney married, and he brought his young son to live with us. A gentle and loving man, Barney was a terrific father and stepfather. He adored my mother and us children. Mama treated his son as though he were her own child, and we all accepted him as our brother. To this day, my children's faces brighten during frequent mentions of Grandpa Barney. In his professional life, Welton Barney Barnett was the first black auditor for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. But his real passion was music. He picked his left-handed Fender Telecaster guitar in small combos and also with a big band that played in a ritzy suburban supper club called the White House. We kids loved watching him when he sat on the couch quietly practicing, his amplifier turned off so as not to disturb the family, and we enjoyed dancing around in time to the music when his friends came over to practice in our basement. It was unfortunate that in keeping with the times, Barney was forced to enter the supper club through the back door, while his white bandmates went in through the front door. While I was preparing for an estate sale after Mama and Barney passed away, I came across an obituary about him in an archived 1985 edition of Downbeat magazine. There, for the first time, we children learned that he had played with jazz legends Cab Calloway and Duke Ellington and this is a quote from Downbeat, his New York City heydays in the 40s. Mama and Barney both had good heads for business, and together they opened Mama's own beauty salon, Joanna Salon of Beauty, on 48th Street and 4th Avenue in South Minneapolis, at a time when the practice of redlining limited black families to living and doing business in areas that were not as far south as that neighborhood. Later, after her first employer, B, passed away, they bought the building she had owned and turned it into a beauty school. Career Beauty Academy was the first and only African-American beauty school to ever exist in the state of Minnesota. Unfortunately, they were unable to sustain it. It closed after 5 short years, but that did not stop my courageous mother. She opened another salon and also accepted an invitation to start a cosmetology program in the Minneapolis Public Schools, a program that still exists at Edison High School. And when she was almost 60 years old, after she had owned and operated 2 beauty salons and the beauty school, and after she had started the program for the public schools, I proudly witnessed my amazing mother march across the stage of Northrop Auditorium at the University of Minnesota to accept the Bachelor of Science degree in vocational education she had earned. I come from a long line of role models, Black women entrepreneurs and educators. My maternal grandmother developed and sold a line of hair products and taught her patrons how to use them. My great-grandmother, together with my great-grandfather, turned their home into a boarding house for African-American railroad porters in Lincoln, Nebraska, when they were not allowed to stay in hotels. I am proud to be the inheritor of my foremothers' remarkable, enterprising spirit. It is because of their legacy that I have been able to achieve all that stuff Mary read about. And I'm happy to say that my daughter, my youngest daughter, Ebony, followed in my mother's and grandmother's footsteps, and she does Mary's hair now. So again, Mary, thank you so much for inviting me to read with you tonight.
Thank you, Carol.
So, Michael, your name's Michael?
It's actually my brother's name. No, my name is Matthew.
Matthew, are you twins? Matthew and Michael?
No.
Okay, all right. So Matthew gave you an introduction to Mary. I'm going to repeat some of that because you can't hear it enough, but I'm going to tell you more too. Mary is a dear, dear friend, and we've been friends for quite a while now. We belong together in one of the writing groups that we both belong to is called Twin Cities Black Women Writing. And we've had many, many conversations over the years about her poetry and about this memoir and about the stuff I'm trying to write and the stuff that Genesia and oh my goodness, it's just an amazing thing to have. But let me tell you a little bit more about Mary. Mary Moore Easter is the author of 4 poetry books, From the Flutes of Our Bones, The Body of the World, which was a Minnesota Book Award finalist, Walking from Origins, and Free Papers, poems inspired by the testimony of Eliza Winston, a Mississippi slave escaped to freedom in Minnesota in 1860. Newly published from Noden Press, thank you, Mr. Norton, for publishing her memoir, Memoir of Dance and Race, The Way She Wants to Get There, Telling on Myself, which is what we are celebrating tonight. Mary's poems have been widely published in Poetry, Prairie Schooner, The Christian Century, Waterstone, Soul Flow Pojo, and other impressive journals and anthologies. She gives numerous public readings in Minnesota and nationally. Her work can also be found as texts for art songs and on library-sponsored poetry trails. In fact, just this August, the Source Song Festival hosted Mary as their poet-in-residence. The group titled the festival after her book of poems, From the Flutes of Our Bones. And in the first ever live concert of its kind, they premiered an evening of original songs composed by Minnesota song composers, performed by their 8 Minnesota duos, which highlighted 8 poems from her amazing poetry collection. You go, Mary. Okay, so as Matthew told us, and I'm going to repeat, Mary was born during segregation in Petersburg, Virginia, to parents who were on the faculty of Virginia State College, now Virginia State University. She was as immersed in her parents' artistic and intellectual interests as she was in the limitations segregation imposed on her black world. Her adult career as an independent dancer, choreographer, and founder and director of Carleton College's dance program overlapped with her writing as a Cave Canem Fellow at the Foundation for African American Poetry. She is the recipient of many awards, which I won't repeat, and I'll just keep going here. As we know, in 2002, Carleton College named the new studios in the White Center for Creativity to honor her legacy, the Mary Easter Dance Studios. I was honored when Mary invited me to write a blurb for her magnificent memoir that we are celebrating tonight. And here's what I said. In the way she wants to get there, Mary Moore Easter has penned a powerful, absorbing memoir of her decade-long journey toward becoming the dancer, choreographer for whom the dance studio at Carleton College would eventually be named. Her poetic voice comes through on every page, imbuing this remarkable work with characters and images that linger long after the final page is turned. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend, Mary Moore Easter.
Lest this whole evening turn into a mutual admiration society, I'm going to get with reading something. Thank you, Carolyn. In excerpts from Chapter 1, meet Mary Easter in 1968, moving with her family to Northfield, Minnesota. Even after we had located to Northfield, I was still sleeping through sex. I never intended to disappear at the crucial moment, to fade into delicious heaviness, dragged under the dark of inviting waters, to drift away, away. In the morning, he'd say, "Do you remember what happened last night?" My blank stare would fill with embarrassment, like a slow tide rising. "Oh, again? I'm sorry." My trickster body had betrayed me. What did it know that I did not? I was not an unwilling wife. Inconceivable. I was not bored. Of course not. Me? Overwhelmed? Well, sometimes. But trickster would not listen to reason, would not behave. This body knew what it liked, disdained compromise, slipped the mind's bonds with 1,000 stratagems. It loved the dulling of the moment, the even descent, then quick into the deep. And on the other side of consciousness, a layover in the journey from here to somewhere else, a climb toward new worlds. Willing to work to exhaustion at a whim, it wandered off when trapped. Trickster, sullen child, snatched the ball and went home at any hint of coercion, insisting on a personal interpretation of these crimes. I couldn't catch it in action. Hell, I wasn't sure it even existed. But of course it did, the charmer, soothing and murmuring me down and down into sleep anywhere. Skip. 1968, I was 27 years old and I was in Minnesota, a place of enormous sky, eventless landscape, and people who were unlike me, mostly white. When Carleton College offered Fred, my husband, a job, we weren't even sure which Minnesota town claimed the campus until we tracked down Northfield on a map. And now, here we were, Negro pioneers in this expanse of blue sky. Elsewhere, the nation was in turmoil. Vietnam War protests. Martin Luther King Jr. assassinated. "I may not get there with you," he said the night before his death, voice swelling, almost breaking. I stood in front of the TV on its rolling cart, mute at the news. One thought overwhelmed me. They're not going to let us have anything. If they won't let us have this good man rejecting centuries of violence with love, they're not going to let us have anything. The prophet gone, rioting raged in more than 100 cities. Rubble still defiled inner city blocks when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. Grief, stunned disbelief, calls to action shook the cocoon of everyday life while we packed boxes and books for the move to Carleton. To judge from the news, the world was either falling apart or being reborn. Sometimes it seemed like both. But as we sped along for an hour in the June sun, this landscape didn't exclaim anything. To an Easterner like me, it was without events. It merely kept up a green rolling murmur of corn and soybeans, a silo in the distance, an island of farmhouse. Skip. On our first exploratory trip downtown, I planted my dark brown body solidly in the middle of the sidewalk on Division Street to resist Mallory's full-weight tug at my hand. I just negotiated the aisles of Margaret Stark's shop with my 2-year-old whirlwind. School was out for the summer, June streets clear from curb to curb. Margaret Stark's screen door swung open, and I exchanged places on the sidewalk with a blonde woman and her tow-headed toddler. He stopped in his tracks at the sight of us. "Stop staring," she hissed under her breath. "You've seen Negroes before." Embarrassment fueled her stride away from us. The kid kept looking back while she dragged him away across Division. That was a snapshot of the town we had just moved to. Unaccustomed enough for Negroes, for a child to stare dumbfounded, aware enough for his mother to be embarrassed. Northfield was white in 1968. Still, our welcome from Carlton was rousing. They were going to make sure this black thing worked. Mary, come on, babe, wake up, it's time to go home. Fred was shaking my shoulders. His voice pulled me from the blackness of sleep into the dim light of the party. Buzz of voices, quiet music. Nothing to dance to. Dancing, that's what I thought a party was until I got to Northfield. Here, people talked and ate, and talked and drank and talked. And that was the party. It was interesting for a while, but then the heaviness would come over me. Trickster chanted, all or nothing, and I would find a corner where I slipped down the waiting hole and into the dark water. With every invitation, I expected again the energy of funky music, the swing and crush of the crowd, the jog of the group to the same rhythm, with infinite variations in this one's pause and that one's catch step. Like at home in Virginia, or anywhere I'd been with lots of black people. No matter how much talk, there would always be a moment where we took to the floor, and even the most illustrious black VIP would step out of the sarcophagus of his importance and get down. Like the cool teenager he once was, cap in the hand he tucked back at his side, shoulders hunched, feet swiveling in his own trademark style. Not here. Skip. The 31 black students at Carleton fit into our living room. On purpose, Fred invited them to our house instead of holding a meeting on campus. That night, it was just us. I made sure there were enough pillows on the floor, enough soft drinks. I was primed to learn their names as each one spoke. When they were settled and looked his way, Fred said, "Some of you interviewed me, and the rest of you've read my bio. You'll get to know me better as we work together. But today is about you. I want to hear your concerns, how life is in the nitty-gritty of living at Carleton. I want you to know how much power you have. And I want to thank you. After all, you're the ones who got me here." And in truth, their determination to carry forth the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. had fueled their demands that Carleton bring people like us to campus. With that, they were off and running. They had stories of casual racism, of being intellectually underestimated as a matter of course, of intentional slights and misplaced indifference. The whole range of stuff that makes it hard to get through a day. I cut out actual examples to make this shorter. It was not just the town of Northfield that was white. The Carleton College faculty was white, except for the lone black biologist, Vanny White, white in name only. The staff was white, white janitors, white cooks, white dishwashers, white shop workers, white secretaries. No one called them administrative assistants in 1968. You know, I thought about this section on the morning after the election, and I thought about how it's not enough, but things do change. Just wanted to tell you that. Here, there would never be that nod to me from a black kitchen worker like at Sarah Lawrence, my alma mater, or a meeting of eyes from the black groundsman at my prep school in the Berkshires, a glance that would confirm my presence there, my known history, my very existence. Some of Carleton's staff lived in White Northfield, but most drove into town from smaller farm communities, from White Dundas and White Randolph. Some seemed to share the certainty demonstrated by poor white people in the South that though they might have little in material terms and no way out of their stripped lives, they had one thing to bolster them. They were white. And from their pedestal of whiteness, they could look down on any black person. A black girl like Judy, brought up in what people were now calling the ghetto, was not likely to miss the attitude of superiority, the jealousy, in a sidelong criticism of her clothing and a reminder of her need for a scholarship. Many of the students gathered in our living room were the first in their families to attend college. They came from big cities or from the rural South. They had never even imagined a place like Northfield. But they didn't just want understanding. They were not just there to receive. They wanted to show Carleton the home that was in them, the words, the moves, the song of themselves. They needed support to do that, which is why my husband was hired. Fred talked to the anger, hope, and sheer determination on their faces. He said, "We're in this together. I'm here to listen to you and to act on your behalf. I've been through this same stuff, first at the gunnery prep school and then at Harvard. I promise you, you have an ally now." Then he looked at Judy with a twinkle in his eye and added, "Besides, what makes you think a skinny girl like you is going to beat somebody up with all that mad coming out of your eyes?" He'd caught them off guard, and they laughed at the image of little Judy Brown beating up the business office secretary. Well, it was funny physically, even though she'd have been more than equal to any verbal contest. When the official part of the meeting was over, students flocked around. They asked me about the children. So good to see little black kids running around the campus. They admired the big Marimekko print I'd hung over the sofa. They looked in the kitchen. "Can we come to dinner sometime?" I liked them. I felt like part of a team, even though I wasn't the one with the job. I knew I'd make a good college wife, like all the women I'd met here. They were silent support. Hardly any were faculty, despite their degrees. At one of the coffees with Linda and Dagmar, they said, "Faculty wives can take Carleton courses free." It sent me running to the catalog. Did they have dance classes? Yes. I'd always wanted to dance again, and the studio was just blocks from our house. What time? Mornings. Could I get a babysitter? Could I go? Yes, yes. Where? Cowling Dance Studio. It was decided just like that. Something to do other than dishes and lunches. I showed up at the beginning class, 9:50 a.m. Tuesday. The studio was beautiful, much bigger than the main studio at the Martha Graham School in New York, which to me was the apotheosis of dance space. Just after Mallory's birth in New York, I took a frantic one-week dance workshop at Graham, the first since college. I was trying to get in shape after bearing 2 children, a mere jog to my body's memory of dancing, not real training. And now, 2 more years had gone by in which I taught piano, sitting down, music theory, sitting down, chorus, standing in one place, and dance where they moved and I mostly watched to see if they were doing the sequence right. I wasn't going to burn up anybody's class with spectacular techniques, so the first level at Carleton seemed the safest bet. No matter what happened, I'd surely know more than the rank beginners. We gathered in the lounge, an array of legs sticking out of shorts, sweatpants, and street clothes. I wore leotard, tights, and leg warmers like you're supposed to. I mean, it was not like I didn't know anything. From my seat on the long couch, on the lounge couch, I could see into the empty studio. The west window wall looked out on campus buildings. Linoleum tiles stretched along a bank of mirrors to the east windows, which let in, floor to ceiling, the green hill down to Bell Field and the fall glory of the Arboretum in the distance. What a room to dance in, like twirling through the natural world, through the weather itself in a light-filled cocoon. A small blonde woman with a big personality in her voice called us together. Already, no question, we will obey Linda Osborne with our bodies and souls right from the beginning. She lined us up. We walked down the floor to the rhythm of her drum. After the first time across the floor, she called out, "Green tights, what's your name?" "Mary Easter." "Get in the front row. Everybody else, follow her rhythm and the way she wants to get there." "Okay, starting on the right foot." "That's the one nearest me," she grinned. "Let's go." The tom-toms rumbled to her sticks, and we walked, me in the front row, wanting to get there, trying to keep my feet connected to the linoleum instead of taking off to fly around the room, swoop to the ceiling, do dips and dives, because I could have. Right at that minute, I could have spread wings and taken off with the pure happiness of this rhythm, the motion, Linda's voice, this wanting to get there, walking in the front row. She saw more than I thought possible. Shortly, Linda was bending low, ponytail sweeping the floor, and we bent. And then she was running, and then we were running, transformed to gliding, air streaming from my arms. She was bouncing with feet pointed and knees pumping like a cantering horse. We cantered. We didn't dare not dance for her. Suddenly the hour was over, out of breath, sweating, beaming. The class applauded. Trickster body will dance for food. Trickster body will be food. The other me was alive, awake, grateful for the moment. For 1 hour, twice a week, I danced again. Not the tap or ballet of my childhood, or the frantic 1 week of Graham technique, but regular classes in modern dance, towering architecture of curves and turns, clear space low to the ground, eyes on the horizon. Here, legs fly up and down like banners at the finish line. Here, absorb music through your skin, through your lungs on a breath. Sweat like a juiced fruit, fragrant with your own salt. Slide from mind to mind, changing worlds, dimensions on one spot. To think that I just stumbled on all this. My teacher knew things I had never considered. I felt like I was gobbling this class, stuffing myself with it. So hungry was I for its nourishment. Even in these weeks of discovery, Trickster stamped her feet and shouted, "More, more." Thank you. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, conversation, but after Carolyn's selection, I wanted to alert you that there are chapters in my book, one for my mother called An Artist Herself, in which she understands something of what I'm going through, because of the demands of art and the collisions with family life. And there is another called Daddy Said No, which was not no to art, but it was a no to keep me safe from the conditions of segregation and the dangers that were all around me. Okay. I will stop advertising now. And I would love to hear from you. Any comments you have to make?
Oh, that was so emotional.
Oh my goodness. Well, you were there a lot of the time.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I was hoping it would ring with people who are here who were dancers with me at that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with that particular teacher, you just captured her completely.
Okay.
And she was wonderful and inspiring, and you didn't argue with her.
Right, right. We have all known her for a long time. Okay. Thank you, third. Yeah, Warren.
I just want to say, as someone who was a next door neighbor to you for a number of years, that was really gorgeous. It was beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Maureen. Thank you very much. You're very much a part of it. Okay, Colleen.
Somebody last night, Mary Red at the University Club, said, will you, and this is my question, will you do a audio book because you're so beautiful in your, you know, I mean, I never think about that because I love to read, but it's like hearing you, I'm like, what? You need to- I don't know
Thank
how
you.
that works.
I hope the audio producers are listening to you. I still remember how to read and I could do it.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
Anything left out? Was there something you were expecting to hear about? Yeah.
Hey, Mary, what role did Florence Cobb play in your ending up in Minnesota and a black woman teaching dance in Minnesota? Because she preceded you, right?
Yes, but this is how I met Florence Cobb. I would go to concerts at Northrop, and there would be this black woman with a car full of kids, and I would notice her. And after several concerts, I noticed her more, but I never knew her. I never knew her. You know, she was somewhere else, and she was at Mankato, in fact. And there was not all of that easy exchange among colleges, college dance departments. That somewhat developed later. But I did not know Florence Cobb. I didn't know that she was doing what I was doing. Yeah, in many ways, all right. I must have asked somebody at some point, who is that woman? I keep seeing her. But that was it, yeah, yeah. You know, there's a kind of larger dance community that we consider always existed. Where are the dance jobs? You know,
Right.
which colleges have the dance jobs? And it becomes a kind of, is it a dynasty? You know, so-and-so held that job, and then she left and went to the East Coast, and so-and-so has that job now. I mean, some examples are that Judith Howard has my job, for which I'm very delighted what she's doing with it. But when Fricke has Judith's job at McAllister, from which Judith came to Carleton, and you will name off easily a whole series of things like that, but that was not the case then. There were not that many dance jobs, and what you will discover in my story is that Carleton was not hot to have a dance program. So a lot of my work was both establishing it and establishing that they would want something that they didn't want. Making that reasoning. The temptation, of course, with a question like that is to read you the entire book. But we don't have to, you'll have to trust me that if this much interested you, there are many other stories. And then there are many stories about my background, my ancestry, all the way to my enslaved great-grandmother. There is a small family tree pictured. I'm not going to be able to find the page. You never can when you want it.
148.
Thank you, thank you. 148. So just to say that I have some old photographs, and I wanted those people to be visible to you. So it is, it's certainly sketchy, but there's a general story there. And yeah,
Is it true that you studied with Nadia Boulanger?
yes, it is. Yes.
Explain who that
Okay.
is, would you please? Because it's like,
Nadia
for me, it's
Boulanger.
like, holy.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to tell them who Nadia Boulanger is?
Well, Nadia Boulanger was an incredible music composition teacher and composer, French composer.
Right, in Paris. Among her
And
students were Aaron
her
Copland.
Lily Boulanger, who didn't live very long, unfortunately, was her sister and was incredible.
Yeah. Well, my junior year abroad, Nadia Boulanger was my theater teacher. And that was set up by the Sarah Lawrence program. And it was wonderful, but she was so terrifying. I mean, this
How
is...
old was she when you studied with her?
Oh, I don't know. But she had already been Aaron Copland's teacher.
Yeah.
Okay, so she wasn't just, this was not her first rodeo. And when she came to visit at Sarah Lawrence, because I had been her student, I was her guide around the campus, also terrifying. Yes. Yeah.
Mary, thank you. I'm going to read the whole book. I have an interesting perspective because I grew up in Northfield as a kid. My dad taught at Carleton, and I lived almost next door to you. Carver.
Can you...
Yeah, no, I can't. Sorry. I can't. I'm sorry if you can't hear me.
I can hear you. I just don't know who you are, and I
Oh,
would like to
well.
know.
That's Cindy.
It's Cindy.
Cindy,
Yeah.
child.
Yeah, child.
Oh my God. Child.
Cindy Carver.
Cindy
No,
Carver.
not child. I was a child.
Yeah.
And not Cindy Child, Cindy Carver.
Okay, well,
Right?
I knew you both.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Right. And so it was so fascinating to hear what was going on that I had no idea as a kid, except that I was really scared of Carleton. Always. I was scared to go to college because it was just this big thing, with all of these people talking.
Not dancing.
So thank you. It's
Well, thank you, Cindy. I'm sorry I got you mixed up with
all right.
yeah, a person of your general age at the time. Yeah. Yeah, David.
Would you talk a little about what it was like to have a creative mom?
Well, okay. Well, first, two things. We were very close, and she was consumed by music. She was very gifted, and her gift had been recognized. But most of her fame started after she was 50. Her first publications came when she was 50, which is, and she used that as a great guide for me. She would often say when I was despairing about how far I had gotten or how far I had not gotten. She said, "Oh, I had barely started when I was your age." You know? So that was a lot of, was a tremendous amount of encouragement that it wasn't all over just because I hadn't started this, 20 years before or whatever length of time. Also, she understood the whole thing. I mean, okay, I'm thinking of examples, but this is not the time for that. She understood about the difficulty with, the kids and a husband who had not planned on any of this, because there I was, 27 years old. Many people are of the mind that, well, if you're going to be a dancer, this is way too late. You should have gotten serious about this before. And so it was all sort of poor Mary. There she is trying to do this thing that is not going to be possible. And I thought of every single one of them when I made my New York debut 6 months after my 40th birthday. I did not set out to become a star. I had to have the thing. I had to have the experience of it. And if that turned out well, good. And if it didn't turn out well, it wasn't why I was in it anyway, And so I would say that attitude towards art was a part of my mother's influence as well. She used to talk about all of the music that she wrote before she started to draw from her own heritage. And one of her phrases was, I used to write all of these Godolsky-sounding piano pieces, and The Earl King's Daughter was another piece that I wrote. All of these things that had nothing to do with the foundational experience of growing up black in black music. And so I would say that many of her attitudes are things that are have been reflected in my teaching and in my philosophy. Occasionally I think, did I ever have an original thought, or did it all come from Mama? But that is an homage to her, both her living and her accomplishments. I have been asked by people who think that her accomplishments were so great that she wouldn't have had time to mother a daughter. Oh my God. If she'd had any more time, yes, I was glad for the distraction of music some of the time, because I had her full attention. Yeah.
So I promise I'm not a plant, but I wanted to say one of the things that really stands out to me in the storytelling of this book, and then serving Ms. Holbrook, like the way that you all are telling your stories, we get to hear about your inner life, as well as the sort of pioneering things that happen and were in your life and in your family's life because of the time, because of being black, because of all the different things. But we get to hear about your inner life, and I think that for many people, there is not a lot of interaction with what we think about, what we need. Like, you're talking about dance, and yes, you did all these things that essentially are historic, that are pioneering, but the way you describe it is the same existential thing that the rest of us are going through, and that other folks get to have their existential things on display, and we don't often get to have that. Like the way you just described it, you said, I had to have the thing. I didn't start out to be a star. I had to have the thing. That's an entire, and so to see and to hear those things, for me, is very motivating.
Thank you, Genesia.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Just in just say a word of disclosure. Genesia is my assistant. Yes, and so I did not plan her to say that.
No.
Okay.
Not your secretary.
I'll be
Not
there.
your secretary.
She's not, no, she's not my secretary. She is genuinely an assistant, right? Yeah. Aaron.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask about, and if this is, covered in the book and you just want to say it's covered, but, so when did writing poetry and prose become a way of expressing for you?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, when did writing poetry become an essential thing? I always knew that dance would leave me sometime because, like age, okay? That, yeah. But I didn't want to be an absolute beginner at whatever the next expression was going to be. And that's underneath. I mean, I have written journals for a zillion years. And I don't know if this is the first poem, but this is an early poem and very memorable to me because it came out of such terror. My mother was at the Mayo Clinic having a breast operation, and I was very frightened, and I shut myself in a phone booth, and I wrote, "I am falling, falling, and there is no one to catch me, catch me." And at that moment, I looked at the form of it, and the terror was sort of pushed aside because the two sentences each had a repeat of the last words, but the repeat in the last one was different, a request. It was not just a repeat. And I'm telling you the truth, I thought all of that instead of just feeling what I was feeling. And I thought, well, my actual thought was, well, isn't that something? It was, but it was not, okay, I wrote that and then I sat down and wrote a poetry book. No, none of that happened. But I remember it particularly because it was attached to that desperate feeling. It was an expression that had a form somehow that eased feeling I was having. And so that's my answer to your question. And then I got to study, I was with the Northfield Women Poets, and they had publications, and they invited me to join, and I went to the first meeting clutching my published poem so I could prove to them that I was worthy. I mean, that's where I thought I was getting, and there was we had a lot of it was a good development for me, and then later I began to study, and then when I was 72 years old, I got accepted at Cave Canem. I thought when I was writing the application, I'm way too old, they will, never blah, 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 blah. And I got there, and Toy Derricott, one of the co-founders of Cave Canem, with Cornelius Eady, was exactly my age and having a birthday. And I just thought, yeah, okay, that's fine, And it was a life-changing experience for me, especially in terms of writing about blackness. I had been making work about blackness with black sources for a long time. I thought that I had absorbed the need for it, and I had rejected the cautions in the world, in the society. Apparently not. I got there, and for the first time in my life, in a writing situation, being black was enough. I did not have to draw on ancient sources. I did not have to relate what I was writing to what had been written as a part of the canon. Not that people there did not have advanced degrees, many of them, but the sense that it was okay. I had not had that, and didn't know I hadn't had it until, you know, I wrote something that embarrassed me somehow, embarrassed the strictures that I had adopted and set up for myself. And aren't we?
I'm not going to stop you. This is great.
Well, I'll tell you what it was since I started that. Okay, I was writing a love poem, and I was working with the sounds of and yeah, it's called Muscadine. And the last line was speaking of a person who was observing this relationship. I said, "She don't know us." And I knew that "she doesn't know us" would have been correct, but it would not have, that language was not what I was working for the whole poem. And I was so embarrassed by it. I thought, people are going to think I don't know any better. They're going to think that, you know, that this is not grammatical. And it was secret because I wouldn't have told anybody that I was that retro in my personal reactions. But it was embarrassing to me on the inside that I was embarrassed by it. Okay? That I couldn't choose it. I knew that it was the right thing to do, and I did choose it. And turns out it was the first poem I had published in Poetry Magazine. So I was kind of like, you know.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go, yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. You stayed at Carleton for years.
Mhm.
Have you noticed much that's changed in your experience?
Mhm.
And also, do they dance at their parties?
I haven't been to a Carlton party in, maybe 40 years. I don't know. I think a great many things happened there that are really encouraging. You know, I retired in 2008, so I haven't been a part of the campus for many years. And it would be hard for me to say what the situation is now. I don't know the number of black students. I don't know the recruiting procedures. I don't know all of the things that I invested in knowing. A part of trying to make dance an accepted part of the curriculum is being a faculty member, a real faculty member. Okay, that means being on the review committees for things like, I don't know, like economics and psychology, and being on the review committees for people's tenure. All of the collegiate duties, obligations, were a part of making dance acceptable, because I was going to be not this person off on the side doing this thing nobody's interested in, but I was going to be a regular faculty member. And that involved taking on the duties. So one of the reasons I wanted to move to the Twin Cities was when I retired, I had, oh dear, this is being recorded, right? People ask me questions, and then I get into the stuff. I had achieved a certain amount of power on campus, okay? Through my activism, through speeches, through pushing the art form, and through taking on the issues of the campus. So after the Rodney King beating, the campus is in an uproar. And they established a process to go through with it, interviewing all members of the community and talking about campus climate. And I was appointed to be the head of the committee. So I managed the committee's very difficult conversations. I hadn't counted on the fact that I would be the one listening to some very hurtful things, you know. but that's one of the things that I did. And, wait a minute, to get back to, yes. So because of that, I had visibility, I had credibility, I had done the work. And I did not want to be, however useful this is to others, I did not want to stay with no courses, no legitimate contact with students, no power to make anything happen. I thought I did this for years and years and years, and now I'm gonna do something else. So in some ways I can't answer your question because I said, done. And it was 41 years. I mean, you know, I figure it took me 41 years to claw my way to the middle. Okay, so there was a hand back. Okay, we're rolling down. Yes.
Sorry. Do you think the Box Society put African American poets restricted to work at the start of your
Do I think that what?
like the quote unquote box that society put African American poets restricted to work at the start of your career or through the finish?
Do I think that the box society puts African American poets in restricted my work
Yeah.
every day? I don't think that's the end of the discussion, but the restrictions are there. They're built into the notion of culture. What is culture, and what is high culture, and what is low culture, and what is worthwhile and not, and without value. I mean, I think that's. I know it sounds harsh, but that's what I think. Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, I do think that. Okay. All right, I think we're done. Thank you so much.